Right, so what's up, everybody? I just tried to actually do this hangout, so we had some technical issues, so we had to restart it. This video is going to be an attempt to try to tackle some drama that's happened in our community. As I said in the video, when I said I was going to cut the cord, I would only come back and try to visit drama in our community again, on this channel at least, if it's something that can't be ignored and if it's something important to actually hit on. I think that this situation with the DNA in water is actually really important because it's a very heavy blow to the evolutionists that's supporting abiogenesis. Now, what they did here was some evolutionists were in a room and they had a scientist in the room and they misrepresented my position. They strawmanned me. And by the very definition, they presented another argument rather than my own and an attempt to allow that to be attacked. Now, we're going to play the clip of what was actually asked so that we can go ahead and improve this. This actually just happened earlier today. Well, yesterday. I mean, it's 3 in the morning. I just got myself back from work. So I'm going to play this. Hopefully you can hear this okay.
Here's the question, Fuzz. Is it true that degrade and dissolve are synonymous terms when it comes to DNA? And then when DNA is said to dissolve in water, it is...
What happens when DNA dissolves in water? How is he representing my position? Listen to him.
Actually degrading, i.e. breaking down or up into its constituent parts and dissolve in water.
You heard that, right?
Dissolve are synonymous terms when it comes to DNA. And then when DNA is said to dissolve in water, it is actually degrading, i.e. breaking down or up into its constituent parts. Okay. And does it lose its nucleotide sequence?
That's not true. There is a big difference between a molecule dissolving and a molecule degrading. So when you add DNA to water, it readily dissolves. And there is an ionization event that takes place because DNA is an acid, and so there's a proton that is released from the phosphate moiety of DNA, but DNA remains largely intact in solution. And in fact, there's a number of different ways one could go about experimentally demonstrating that DNA largely remains intact in solution.
Now listen to what he mentions.
Over time, DNA will undergo hydrolysis in water, but it doesn't happen immediately. It'll dissolve and remain dissolved in an intact state for quite some time, long enough to be able to do experimental manipulations in the lab to sequence the DNA.
Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about the lab. We're talking about abiogenesis. The environment was far more harsh, and we'll get into that in a little bit, guys. We're not talking about the lab. But how did he strawman me? How did he strawman me? Well, we heard what he said about solution when something's going into solution, right? When something dissolves, it basically means that something's breaking down to its constituent parts. Well, I'm going to screen share a comment that was made by me over a year ago. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull up the screen share. Screen share to everybody. Here we go. Can you see what I'm screen sharing, Antonio?
Yeah.
Okay, so it says, well, when I'm talking about, breaking down to its constituent parts, I am not referring to dissolving. Point blank, over a year ago. Well, when I'm talking about breaking down to its constituent parts, I am not referring to dissolving. But I will say DNA does break apart as well within water. Now, keep in mind why I said that, okay? Because this all segued into a semantical game over whether they were going to accept breaking down. And then when they realized that the videos that they were showing and all the sources that they were showing were not, defending them, I mean, Fiona would just say, well, it just goes into solution. Well, that doesn't tell us anything what's happening on the chemical level. So at this point, they were actually refuted, and it segued into actually dissolving. So it says, just not like what I'm referring to. I am talking about a hydrolysis reaction, which is different. I very clearly said over a year ago that a hydrolysis reaction is different than dissolving. But if you are just going to play semantics, technically you are wrong, because when something dissolves, it comes apart in a specific way depending on the compound. So basically what I was trying to say right here is dissolving and degrading and even hydrolysis reactions, they're basically coming apart. They all mean that they're breaking apart, but there's different reasons why they're breaking apart, and they're all breaking apart much different from each other. So this was basically a semantical game. Now remember, this was over a year ago. This was before anybody was actually talking about an hydrolysis reaction. Here, so show you guys this video here from Fiona was dated April 21st, 2016. April 21st, 2016. That's when she made that particular video talking about an hydrolysis reaction. I made this comment over a year ago. This was before even the discussion that I had with Dragnock on my channel. This comment that I'm posting right now, that I'm showing you guys right now, says, well, when I'm talking about breaking down to its constituent parts, I'm not referring to dissolving. So the fact that he presented my position like that was just 100% dishonest. Clearly, that's not what my position was. I mean, I've been explaining this forever. Just the other day, actually, he came into a room, an Antonio's room, and I actually just explained this to him just the other day. Steve, before this scientist, had a discussion with him, and he still didn't seem to care about that. Didn't seem to process that. I know you guys are reading the end part of that, though, where it says that individual sodium chloride atoms coming apart and the covalent compounds like DNA come apart, I suspect, by breaking down to the individual monomers that make it up. That was an incorrect statement for me to make. DNA doesn't break down to the individual monomers. And obviously, I changed my position on that, months and months ago, because I explained to everybody that DNA stays DNA. It's going to stay DNA. It's just going to break apart in the clusters that actually make up the DNA, the individual molecules that are actually making it up, just DNA. So you have clusters of DNA. You'll have it just stay DNA. It'll break apart. It'll come apart differently that way, because it's separate from covalent compounds, how they break apart. Anyways, what do you got to say about this, Antonio? I mean, because to me, there's no way out of this. I mean, the fact of the matter is that he directly misrepresented my position, or he just didn't understand what my position was. Maybe he doesn't understand what my position is. Well, first of all, I don't buy that. I just explained to him what my position was before he went into this room. He's just trying to be dishonest, and he thought he was being clever by wording it a specific way to where it was gonna, make people think that my position was about to be refuted. Clearly, he was going to disagree when he conflated the hydrolysis reaction with dissolving, because when dissolving happens, it's completely different than a hydrolysis reaction. I can keep on going and going, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, Antonio. What do you got to say about it?
Yeah, man, I don't claim to know about this stuff, honestly, but at the same time, you got to represent somebody's argument correctly. The thing is, I've had these sorts of same ridiculous semantic nonsense happen to me with Steve McRae, too. Like, when we went at it with them, you and I went at excuse me, when you and I went at it with them about this whole zygote thing, and then he tried to say, by a definition, an animal is a multicellular organism, and the fetus starts out as a single cell, so a human would have to be multicellular in order to be a human. So if a human starts out as a single cell, then by definition, there is no human at conception. That was the semantic game he was trying to play. Mm-hmm. But the argument that I was giving was that I'm willing to accept that 100%, but it is not just a definition, because there is, how things are defined, and then there's the actual nature which those things are. They don't define a multicellular organism or a single-celled organism, just by just by some technical semantical thing. They define it because by nature those things are a certain way. Now, a multicellular organism is definitely going to start out as a singular cell at the beginning point, but by nature, by its very nature, it's not a single cell organism. That's what I was telling him. He was trying to, just stick to semantics and terms. I was looking at the whole concept, the whole nature of that very thing. Because that's not the reason why they say that a human being is a multicellular organism, because it starts out as a single cell. Scientists understand that you still got to take into account what is the nature of that entity. By the scientific nature, by the nature of that entity, you still have a multicellular organism. It doesn't matter if it starts out as a single cell. The nature of it is a multicellular organism because it doesn't remain as one. Now, if it would remain as a single cell, it would be by nature like a unicellular organism, but by nature it's not. So he's trying to, take some sort of technical word structure and avoid the nature in order to, attack a straw man. And that's the semantic game he was playing.
He always does that, though.
Yeah, you got to look into account the whole thing. There's the technical structure of, how they categorize something, and then there's the nature of that very thing. You got to take into account all those things as a whole, not separate them apart and then attack a straw man. And that's actually the crap that happened with me. And you was there too. We was talking about it with them. He did that same thing there.
Yeah, this was actually a while ago, and this is like right around or like before this drama that actually happened between myself and Steve. And at the time, Antonio only had like 17 or 20 subscribers on his channel. He didn't get too many viewers on his channel. He's done a lot better now. I think he's got about 200 or so subscribers. His channel's grown a lot. But the atheists in our community, they didn't see that. The evolutionists in our community, they didn't see that. And I suspect that if they were to have seen how me and you had to correct him, then they probably wouldn't have gone down the route that they went. Everybody was basically getting on his case. I mean, Sam was getting on his case. Sock Accounts, I think that's what his name is. He was getting on his case. Everybody was just like, pointing out the fact, like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. You're mistaken when you're talking about this. But he always does that. He's always misrepresenting people. He's always twisting information. And with this case, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but this particular topic that we're on right now about DNA and water, I was actually proven right. Go to that comment that was talked about over a year ago and some of the hangouts that I was in over a year ago, what I was originally talking about, because there's actually discussions that I had that predates like way before this, like 3.5 years ago, where I'm talking about RNA and as the first self-replicator. I was talking about the Sostek experiments and so on. Not even talking about DNA. I could probably pull up some comments on that as well. And I've been talking about the hydrolysis reaction for a long time. It was even explained to these people. Look, I'm talking about it breaking down to its constituent parts. I'm not talking about necessarily dissolving and degrading. All this crap was a semantical game that slowly segued, and then we stayed on that topic for a large period of time. And that was when I was like making a bunch of response videos like this here on my channel. But that was just a semantical game over the definitions of dissolving, or what it means to dissolve. Let me screen share something for you guys. This way you get what I'm trying to say, because everybody knows how this goes. I mean, anybody who's been in this community long enough, I think we all understand what happens in this community. They love to play semantic games whenever they're backed up into a corner. It always comes down to a word game. It's usually The topic always changes from the Bible to science, history, philosophy to, well, how do you define that? Can you define that for me? Well, and it leads on from there. But I'm going to screen share so that you guys can see what it is that I mean, what I'm referring to. Okay.
I want people to understand who are listening to this reason why the bit about Steve talking about the fetus zygote thing, that was the reason why that happened, because he was just trying to argue just on technical definition. My argument wasn't, just technical definition, but the whole of what that entity is. Because no matter what organism or entity you're talking about, you got to deal with the nature of that entity as a whole, not just some semantic structure of a word, because the semantic structure of a word does not determine the nature of what that entity is. Yes, a multicellular organism is going to start off, as, one cell, but by its nature, it's not a single-celled organism. By its nature, it starts off as that, but by its nature, it's a multicellular organism. The nature of that entity is that very thing. So when if you're gonna just avoid nature and focus on some stupid semantical game, then of course you're gonna have a flimsy argument like that. And I think people in his own camp even recognize that.
Yeah, a lot of people were calling him out on that particular situation. A lot of them more. I mean, he got a lot of heat over that particular situation. But if we look at dissolve, it's synonymous with what? To break down. You go to what degrade means. Degrade means for something to break down or deteriorate chemically. And this is that chemistry website that I pointed out in my other discussion that I was in. Dissolving means when a solid breaks up into the solvent, covalent solid glucose breaks up, and the molecules enter the water to make up the solution. Go back to the original comment that I made a while back. Well, when I am talking about breaking down to its constituent parts, I am not referring to dissolving, but I will say DNA does break apart as well within water, just not like what I'm referring to. I'm talking about a hydrolysis reaction, which is different. But if you are just going to play semantics, technically you are wrong, because when something dissolves, it comes apart in a specific way, depending on the compound. Ionic compounds make apart by individual sodium chloride atoms coming apart, and covalent compounds like DNA come apart, I suspect. And I explained how I think that DNA was going to break up, or at least at the time how I thought DNA was going to break up. So that's pretty much what that came down to. This little situation, we shouldn't even play the little semantic game, man, because all that's done is it's allowed them to muddy up the waters a bit. But again, the funny thing about this is if we go to the video where Fiona started talking about the hydrolysis reaction, she just proved my point. What actually happened, remember this comment that I put up was about a year ago. The video that I just showed you from Fiona only happened about 5 or 6 months ago. The topic actually died for a couple of months. She brought it back up again and brought up hydrolysis reaction, thinking that I forgot or something, or I wasn't even going to be, pointing out the fact, wait, I was the one who talked about that. I was the one who brought up the hydrolysis reaction to begin with. Her only route here to go, and what she keeps on doing, is she keeps on talking about it will stay at 33 million years at 70 degrees to 90 degrees Celsius, basically, right? The problem is that that's unrealistic. That we're not talking about some sort of lab environment. We're not talking about some sort of perfect environment. We're talking about the early Earth. The temperatures there were not always going to be 70 degrees Celsius. On top of that, you're going to be exposed to elements. You're going to be exposed to all sorts of things inside of nature that are also going to be affecting DNA. It's a delusion to think that we're supposed to accept that DNA is going to be perfectly put in place like it's going to be in some sort of laboratory. We're not talking about a lab environment. We're talking about abiogenesis. I would have loved actually what that scientist would have actually said if they would have actually asked the correct questions. If I would have been inside of that hangout and I started asking him, hey, what happened with DNA in the early Earth and abiogenesis, man? Don't ask him stupid questions like, you know, how long it's going to last for 33 million years because of, you know, it's at 70 or 90 degrees Celsius. You can ask him convenient questions like that, or out of context remarks like that, but you're going to be getting out of context remarks. We're talking about abiogenesis. This is what this all has to do with. If you put that in a temperature at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to, you know, 400, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever, and your article is even showing that if you increase the temperature, the bonds are going to break apart rapidly. Well, then you're only coming into problems for your own position. That's the point here. And there's no way around it. I mean, she proved my point when she brought that article up. When she brought up the hydrolysis reaction, that was the original point that was actually talked about by me. I mean, just seriously, just screw the dissolving thing for a minute. I actually told her that in a recent comment before this hangout, this discussion actually happened with this scientist. It was on one of your videos, actually, Antonio. And I told her, look, dude, just screw the dissolving. All right, just screw it. I don't care about the semantic aspect of it. Acknowledge the fact that it does break apart under an hydrolysis reaction, and acknowledge the fact that it's only going to last 33 million years at that particular temperature. You keep on repeating. And as the temperature increases, the bonds are going to break apart at a much more rapid rate, right? These are the things that she needs to actually acknowledge, because if she acknowledges these things, she's going to realize that I'm actually right.
Well, I'm no scientific but I do know that when things heat up, like molecules tend to move faster and break apart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that's like a basic scientific rule, isn't it?
Well, it plays, yeah. I mean, I think everybody knows about that already. You know,
I don't know if this is related to one.
That's high school. That's high school. That's high school level science right there, man. That's high school chemistry right there, like, literally. You know, but I think that's just interesting to me, man. All this nonsense is. I mean, she's had to double down so many times. The people in the community have had to actually take me out of context like this. That's because I'm right. And I'm going to end it right here, guys, because there's really not too much for us to talk about. Fiona, if you want people to respect you more, you need to approach my position for what it actually is. I've been listening to you in some of these hangouts, and you're always very careful not to mention the fact that what your article is actually talking about, that the temperature is good. As the temperature increases, that the bonds are going to break apart at a quicker rate. That's what your article was actually talking about in context. All you do is keep on saying, oh, the phosphodiester bond will last 33 million years. Okay, great. At 70 to 90 degrees Celsius, right? You're missing the point, and you're avoiding the point because you realize that you were actually refuted. And you guys need to leave it alone already. And I think that a lot of Christians really need to learn about this topic, because if they realize how epic this refutation was, if they really got themselves together and started studying this stuff, they would realize how impossible abiogenesis actually is, man. If you're looking at the Sostek experiments, any sort of ocean foam or any sort of idea with the first self-replicator in this environment, even just looking at it from the aspect of, just this heated water in this early Earth, ignore all of the other realistic factors that are going to come into play, because you're going to need certain elements and certain ingredients for life, according to what scientists are suspecting. All the other elements that are going to be there as well. There's too much against it. There's just too many things bombarding DNA and water for us to believe that it's going to actually last a long period of time. And before I end this hangout, actually, you guys need to stop talking about, DNA lasting for a long time in the cell as well. I mean, what kind of idiotic crap is that? Is that on topic? Are we actually talking about, is your DNA inside of the cell? in an environment where it's at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit? Is it in an environment where it's extremely heated? Is it in any environment like that? No, obviously not. Who is acknowledging the fact that it's, if you freeze it to the point to a freezing temperature, all the way to the point of 70 to 90 degrees Celsius, it's going to actually be okay? Me, right? Who is avoiding answering the particular critique that I just offered you guys just now about how the temperature, how it's going to basically increase? Everybody in our community. There's no problem with DNA being inside of the cell. There's never been any problem with that at all. This delusion that you guys keep on talking about is just, it's idiotic, and you guys really need to start talking about this stuff in detail, because all of you guys who keep on trying to talk about this like you know what you're talking about, I'm probably going to start coming after all of you guys and dealing with you guys one-on-one, just to show the fact that you guys don't know what you're talking about. That's it, guys. God bless. Take it easy. Goodbye.